an outspoken, no-nonsense bookstore owner, has no interest in fairy tales until a chance encounter with the charming but duty-bound Prince Edward turns her world upside down. When a royal scandal forces them into the spotlight, Emma must decide if she's willing to rewrite her own story to include a happily ever after. Emma Carter has always preferred the company of books over people, especially the kind of people who believe in love at first sight and fairy tale endings. Practical, independent, and a firm believer that real life is nothing like a romance novel, she's perfectly content running her cozy bookstore in her charming but quiet town. Prince Edward, on the other hand, has spent his life in the public eye, bound by royal duty and expectations he never chose. While the world sees him as the picture-perfect prince, polished, responsible, and destined for a politically advantageous marriage, Edward secretly longs for a life of his own making, one where he isn't just playing a role for the monarchy. When a chance encounter in Emma's bookstore leads to a playful argument about romance, neither of them realizes that a single photo of their interaction is about to go viral. Overnight, Emma becomes the subject of royal gossip, with tabloids speculating about a secret romance between the fiery bookstore owner and the kingdom's most eligible bachelor. As the palace scrambles to control the narrative, Edward is sent to smooth things over, but his attempts only lead to more unexpected sparks and an even bigger media frenzy. Suddenly, Emma is thrust into a world of royal rules, ruthless paparazzi, and a queen who is less than thrilled about her son's new interest. Despite their best efforts to deny their growing attraction, Emma and Edward find themselves drawn to each other in ways neither of them anticipated. But as the pressure mounts and the line between fairy tale and reality blurs, Emma is faced with a choice: walk away from a life she never wanted, or take a leap of faith and risk everything for a love that may just be worth the chaos. After all, maybe some fairy tales are worth believing in. Act 1. The Accidental, Meet Cute, and the Disaster. 1. Introduction to Emma and Edward. Emma Carter is a fiercely independent woman who runs a small but beloved bookstore in her picturesque town. She believes in love, but not in the knight in shining armor kind. She prefers romance in books, where it's safe. Emma Carter is a fiercely independent woman who runs a small but beloved bookstore in her picturesque town. She believes in love, but not in the knight in shining armor kind. She prefers romance in books, where it's safe, predictable, and free from real-life complications. In her world, love is something you read about, not something you chase. Her days are spent curating the perfect book recommendations for her loyal customers, sipping endless cups of coffee, and dodging her well-meaning best friend's attempts to set her up on blind dates. She enjoys her quiet, uncomplicated life, where the biggest drama is whether to restock the classics or the latest bestsellers. Emma has no time for grand gestures, sweeping declarations, or fairy tale endings. She's seen enough real-world heartbreak to know that love often comes with strings attached, and she has no interest in being anyone's damsel in distress. If anything, she's the one rescuing others, with a perfectly chosen book and a no-nonsense pep talk. But when a certain prince strolls into her bookstore, charming, frustratingly handsome, and completely out of place in her world, Emma finds herself at the center of a story she never expected to be part of. And for once, she might not be able to flip to the last page to see how it all ends. Prince Edward, the charming but reluctant heir to the throne, is feeling the weight of his royal duties. He dreams of freedom, but is constantly reminded of his responsibilities by his strict, traditional mother, Queen Eleanor. Prince Edward, the charming but reluctant heir to the throne, is feeling the weight of his royal duties more than ever. On the surface, he's everything a prince should be: charismatic, well-mannered, and effortlessly charming. But behind the polished smile and tailored suits, he is a man suffocating under the expectations placed upon him. For as long as he can remember, his life has been dictated by protocol, tradition, and the ever-watchful eye of the public. Every decision he makes, from the way he speaks to the people he associates with, is scrutinized by the press, the royal advisors, and most of all, his formidable mother, Queen Eleanor, a woman of unwavering discipline and duty. The Queen is determined to mold Edward into the perfect king, whether he likes it or not. But Edward has dreams beyond the gilded walls of the palace. He longs for a life where he can make choices for himself, where he isn't just a symbol, but a man free to love, to explore, and to find happiness outside of royal obligations. He secretly envies ordinary people, those who can walk down the street unnoticed, fall in love without political consequences, and live without the crushing weight of expectation. When a diplomatic trip unexpectedly leads him into a quaint little bookstore, Edward sees a glimpse of that freedom in the form of Emma Carter. She doesn't bow, she doesn't fawn over his title. In fact, she challenges him in a way no one ever has. Their brief, sharp-witted exchange leaves him intrigued. What he doesn't realize is that this seemingly ordinary moment will set off a chain of events that will throw both of their lives into chaos and force him to confront what he truly wants. Because for the first time in his life, Edward may have found something worth fighting for, not as a prince, but as a man. The second encounter. Edward, desperate for a break from royal life, sneaks out in disguise and wanders into Emma's bookstore. Emma, mistaking him for an ordinary but oddly well-dressed tourist, playfully critiques his book choices. Edward, desperate for a break from the suffocating formality of royal life, does something wildly out of character. He sneaks out of the palace, dons a simple, yet still impeccably tailored sweater and coat, and disappears into the city without security or an entourage. It's reckless, irresponsible, and undoubtedly against every royal protocol. And yet, as he strolls through the lively streets, unnoticed and free, he feels more like himself than he has in years. His wandering leads him to a quaint little bookstore, tucked between a cafe and an antique shop. The scent of old paper and fresh coffee greets him as he steps inside, and for a moment, he simply enjoys the quiet hum of the space. He runs his fingers along the spines of the books, admiring the titles, when a voice interrupts his thoughts. That's an interesting choice. Edward turns to find a woman, brilliant hazel eyes, an arched brow, and an air of amused skepticism, studying the book in his hand. She's not fawning, not gasping in recognition, just unimpressed. It's refreshing. "I thought it looked rather interesting," he replies smoothly, glancing at the book in question. "Some dense historical biography." Emma smirks, crossing her arms. "Let me guess. You picked it up because it looks intellectual and like something one should read, but deep down, you have no intention of making it past the first chapter." Edward blinks, momentarily caught off guard. "That's quite an assumption. Am I wrong?" she challenges, tilting her head. He hesitates, then lets out a chuckle. No, actually, Emma grins. I knew it. You've got reads out of obligation, not enjoyment, written all over you. Edward, entirely unaccustomed to being read so easily, finds himself both intrigued and entertained. And what would you suggest, then, O wise bookstore owner? She taps her chin as she surveys the shelves, then plucks a novel from the stack and hands it to him. It's got adventure, humor, and heart. I promise it won't feel like homework. Edward studies the book, then her. And if I don't like it? Emma shrugs. Then clearly you have terrible taste, and I can't help you. For the first time in a long time, Edward laughs. Not the polite, rehearsed chuckle he gives at formal events, but a real, unguarded laugh. He doesn't know who this woman is, but in just a few minutes, she's managed to make him feel something real. What he doesn't realize is that their brief encounter is about to become very, very public. Because the moment he steps out of the store, with Emma still blissfully unaware of his true identity, a camera catches the perfect shot of him smiling at her, book in hand. And by morning, the entire world is buzzing about the mystery woman who just might have captured the attention of the Crown Prince. After some witty banter, she jokingly tells him that princes are overrated and never as charming as they think they are. Edward smirks. If only she knew. 3. The scandalous revelation. The next day, Emma's bookstore is swarmed by paparazzi. Turns out, a photo of her unknowingly roasting the Crown Prince has gone viral, with the headline, "Bookstore owner rejects Prince Edward. Is he not fit for her?" The royal palace is not amused. Act 2, the unwanted publicity and the forced apology. 1. Emma versus the palace. To control the narrative, Queen Eleanor demands that Emma apologize to Edward publicly. Emma refuses. She didn't do anything wrong. Edward, amused by Emma's defiance, convinces his mother to let him handle it. The next morning, Emma wakes up to chaos. Her phone is buzzing nonstop. Texts from her best friend, missed calls from unknown numbers, and social media notifications exploding with her name. Confused, she groggily opens her phone and is met with a flood of headlines. Prince Edward's mystery woman. Who is she? Bookstore banter or royal romance? Commoner dares to mock the crown prince. Emma groans. You've got to be kidding me. By the time she reaches her bookstore, reporters are already lurking outside, cameras flashing the second she steps through the door. She barely has time to process what's happening before a stern-looking royal official strides in and hands her an envelope. "Miss Carter," he says, his tone clipped. "Her Majesty, Queen Eleanor, requests your presence at the palace." Emma stares at him. "You mean demands, don't you?" The official doesn't blink. "The Queen wishes to resolve the unfortunate media frenzy." Emma crosses her arms. "By resolve, you mean she wants me to go on camera, apologize for existing, and reassure the world that I'm not some kind of power-hungry seductress?" The official coughs. "I wouldn't have put it that way." "Well, I would," Emma says firmly, "and I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do." By the time she arrives at the palace, because, let's be honest, refusing a royal summons entirely might be slightly dangerous, she is in full battle mode. She expects intimidation, guilt-tripping, and thinly veiled threats. What she does not expect is to walk in and find Prince Edward lounging casually in a chair, sipping tea like he has all the time in the world. "Ah, the fearless bookstore owner," Edward greets, eyes twinkling with amusement. I wondered if you'd actually show up. Emma shoots him a glare. I didn't have much of a choice. Across the room, Queen Eleanor clears her throat, looking as regal and disapproving as a monarch possibly can. Miss Carter, she begins, her voice cool. This situation has caused quite the stir. The royal family cannot afford reckless scandals. We expect you to make a public statement correcting any misunderstandings. Emma folds her arms. Let me get this straight. You want me to apologize for what, exactly? Talking to someone in my own bookstore? The Queen's lips press into a thin line. You failed to show proper decorum. Oh, I'm sorry, Emma interrupts, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Next time a stranger walks into my shop, I'll be sure to curtsy before daring to speak. Edward nearly chokes on his tea. Queen Eleanor's glare sharpens, but before she can say another word, Edward sets down his cup and leans forward, thoroughly entertained. Mother, perhaps we're being a bit dramatic. I hardly think Emma has committed treason by recommending me a book. The Queen gives her son a withering look, but Edward only grins. Tell you what, he continues, turning to Emma. Since this entire debacle is my fault for daring to set foot outside the palace, why don't I handle it? Emma raises an eyebrow. Oh? And how exactly do you plan to handle it? Edward's smile turns mischievous. By making it worse. 2. The hilarious publicity stunt. Edward visits Emma's bookstore again, this time making a big show of forgiving her in front of reporters. Emma has just finished stacking a new shipment of books when she hears it. Chaos outside her store. Loud chatter, camera flashes, and the unmistakable murmur of a gathered crowd. She barely has time to process what's happening before the bookstore door swings open, and in walks Prince Edward. But this isn't the casually dressed, incognito version of Edward who had wandered in last time. No, this is Prince Edward, Duke of Ormond, future king of God knows where, and maker of very bad decisions. He's in full royal mode, immaculate suit, perfect smile, every inch of him exuding the effortless charm that has made him the press's golden boy. And behind him, a small army of reporters, photographers, and his very frazzled royal security team who look about 3 seconds away from having a collective heart attack. Emma sighs. You've got to be kidding me. Edward strolls in like he owns the place, hands behind his back, surveying the shop as if he's never seen it before. Then, loud enough for every camera to pick up, he proclaims, "Ah, yes. The very scene of the crime." Emma blinks. Crime? He nods solemnly. The crime of a fearless bookstore owner daring to question my taste in literature. He places a dramatic hand over his chest. Truly, a scandal of epic proportions. The press eats it up, reporters whispering, cameras clicking. Emma, however, is less amused. Oh, so that's what we're doing? Public theatrics? She asks under her breath. Edward winks. Trust me. Then, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he sighs deeply and turns to face her. Miss Carter, he begins, as if he's delivering a royal decree. I have traveled here today, against all odds, to tell you one thing. Emma folds her arms. And what's that? Edward clasps his hands together, eyes twinkling with mischief. I forgive you. A stunned silence follows. And then, absolute media mayhem. Emma stares at him. You forgive me? He nods gravely. Yes, I know it must have been difficult for you, publicly humiliating a poor, unsuspecting prince who only wanted to enjoy a good book. Emma gapes at him, half tempted to throw the nearest hardcover at his head. You are unbelievable." Edward grins, thoroughly enjoying himself. "Please, no need to thank me. Though if you insist, I will accept one of your expert book recommendations." Emma exhales sharply, fighting the urge to strangle him on live television. But then she notices something. The reporters, hanging on to every word, slowly shifting the narrative. The headlines are no longer about her embarrassing the royal family. They're about him being playfully dramatic, teasing the media, making light of a situation that had been blown out of proportion. And suddenly, she understands. He wasn't here to humiliate her. He was here to save her. Edward watches her carefully, waiting for her reaction. So she does the only thing she can do. She plays along. "Well, Your Royal Highness," she says, dramatically plucking a book from the shelf. "Since you so graciously forgave me, I suppose I can forgive your truly terrible reading habits." The crowd chuckles. Edward smirks. "How generous of you." She shoves the book into his hands. "Read this. It's about a prince who learns how to not be a complete menace." Edward chuckles. "Sounds life-changing." And just like that, the tension shifts. The reporters capture a moment of humor, the internet gets its fairy tale-worthy banter, and the Queen, watching from the palace, gets her PR crisis resolved. But as Edward meets Emma's eyes, he realizes something else. This wasn't just about controlling the media. He genuinely enjoyed being here, with her, and for the first time in his life, he wonders if this story, the one unfolding between them, isn't worth seeing through to the end. Emma, never one to back down, plays along, sarcastically bowing and dramatically declaring, "Oh, mighty prince, please forgive this lowly commoner for thinking you were a regular person with bad taste in books." The media loves it. The Queen? Not so much. 3. The unexpected chemistry. Despite the ridiculousness of it all, Emma and Edward enjoy their back-and-forth banter. Edward keeps visiting her shop, and their conversations become more personal. Despite the circus of cameras and media frenzy surrounding their initial forgiveness performance, Emma can't deny that something unexpected has happened. The ridiculousness of it all starts to fade into the background, and what remains is an oddly comfortable rhythm between her and Edward. He keeps showing up, always with that same charming smile, always with an air of casual grace that somehow never feels forced. At first, Emma had expected it to be a one-time stunt, but then, to her surprise, Edward returns the very next day, and the day after that. His visits aren't just for more public appearances or staged photo ops. No, these are quiet, personal moments between the two of them, hidden in the aisles of Emma's bookstore, away from the paparazzi's prying eyes. One afternoon, Emma is shelving a new shipment of romance novels when she hears the familiar jingle of the doorbell above the store's entrance. Without looking up, she calls out, "I thought we agreed you weren't going to just show up unannounced." A chuckle drifts from behind her, and she turns to find Edward standing there, his usual easygoing demeanor in place, though today he looks slightly more disheveled than usual. His tie is loosened, and the crispness of his suit has softened, just a little. He looks like a man who is relaxing for once. "I was hoping for a surprise entrance," he says with a grin, arms wide. "You're not even impressed?" Emma raises an eyebrow. "Impressed by what?" "The fact that you're trying to blend in and look like a normal person." "Hey, I am a normal person." He pulls a face, "At least on days when I'm not busy being a prince." Emma smirks, glancing at the book she's holding. Well, in that case, you've picked the right place. Here, we welcome normal people. Royalty need not apply. Edward laughs, leaning against the counter. I think I'm starting to see the appeal of your world, Emma. No pomp, no circumstance, just books and coffee and real people. His words take her a little by surprise. There's something vulnerable in them, something more honest than the man she's seen on TV or in the tabloids. Yeah, she says after a beat, her tone softening. It's easy to forget how much real people crave simplicity. The world's so caught up in appearances. She pauses, noticing the slight tension in his posture. You've had a taste of that world, haven't you? Edward nods, his expression shifting to something a little more introspective. Every day, it's exhausting. The pressure to be perfect, to always look a certain way, to never slip up. Emma raises an eyebrow. Sounds like a lot of rules to follow. Tell me about it. He runs a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing when the next scandal is going to drop or when I'll be expected to perform. There's a moment of silence between them, an unspoken understanding passing through the air. Emma, with her own experiences of navigating expectations, knows exactly how he feels. I get it, she says quietly. But you're not always stuck, you know? Sometimes, the best moments come when you're allowed to mess up a little. She half smiles, like when you walked into my shop and I mocked your book choices. Edward grins, but there's a warmth in his eyes that wasn't there before. I did deserve that, but I'm starting to think I might have enjoyed the teasing more than I'd like to admit. The playful banter, which had started as a way to deal with the absurdity of their situation, has slowly turned into something deeper. Their conversations no longer feel like a performance. They're real, raw even. Have you ever thought about what you'd be doing if you weren't, well, a prince? Emma asks, leaning against a shelf, curious. Edward's smile fades into a thoughtful expression. All the time. I've always wanted to be a writer, you know. A poet, maybe. Or, he pauses, a wry smile creeping back to his lips. Or just someone who gets to read without having someone tell me it's a duty to read something. Emma laughs, the sound light and genuine. A writer, huh? Well, I suppose you can't be worse than half the authors who wander in here and try to sell me their masterpieces. Edward's eyes light up, his mischievous grin returning. Oh, I have many ideas for a book. A royal romance, perhaps? Emma rolls her eyes. Yeah, that's a great idea. A prince falls in love with a no-nonsense bookstore owner who gives him a hard time at every turn. Really original. Maybe I could write it as a comedy, Edward suggests, playing along. A sort of modern-day fairy tale with real people. No ball gowns, no dragons. Just a couple of unlikely characters, learning to live life their way. She smiles at him. You really think people would read that? I'd read it, he replies, his tone more sincere than she expects. It's the kind of story I'd want to hear, a story where you get to choose your own path. For a moment, Emma finds herself caught in the intensity of his gaze, wondering if there's more to this than playful banter. But before she can analyze it too much, Edward's expression shifts, and he laughs, shaking his head. You know, I thought this whole thing would be ridiculous, he says. The media, the misunderstandings, but I think I found something worth keeping in all this chaos. Emma smiles, but it's softer now, less guarded. What's that? You, he says simply. I think I might be developing a taste for real things. And you, Emma Carter, are real. She can't help but smile at that. It's almost too sweet, but it feels so genuine coming from him. Well, Your Royal Highness, she teases, if you keep this up, I might just start to think you're serious about being normal. Maybe I'm starting to believe in normal too, Edward admits. And as they stand there, the world outside the bookstore feels a little quieter, a little less chaotic. For a brief moment, it's just Emma and Edward, two people finding a space to be themselves. And for the first time in a long while, the pressure of their worlds feels just a little bit lighter. He loves her independence. She loves how normal he is when he isn't being royal. A CT3, the royal complications begin. 1. The growing romance. Edward starts inviting Emma to casual outings, coffee, walks, secret bookstore dates. They both pretend it isn't something serious. As the weeks pass, Edward's visits to Emma's bookstore become more frequent, and their once awkward interactions evolve into something more comfortable. He's no longer just the prince in disguise, and Emma is no longer the defiant bookstore owner who can't believe she's stuck in a royal drama. There's an unspoken understanding between them, a sort of mutual agreement that these moments, these quiet exchanges, are theirs and theirs alone. Edward, always mindful of his royal duties, makes sure their encounters are under the radar. No photographers, no royal security team trailing behind him, just him and Emma, walking through the town like two ordinary people. And though the world may expect something grand, something that screams royal romance, the two of them are content with these simple, casual outings. It starts with coffee. One chilly morning, Edward texts Emma out of the blue. Coffee? Her response is quick. Sure, but if you try to buy my coffee again, I'll walk right out. Edward chuckles at the screen before sending a reply. Deal. But I pick the place. When they meet at the local cafe, it's nothing like the glitzy galas or press events he's used to. There's no one making sure they're perfectly posed for the cameras. It's just two people sitting at a corner table, sipping warm drinks, exchanging jokes, and talking about everything from books to life outside the palace. Edward leans back in his chair, his eyes twinkling with amusement. You know, he says, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly, this is the most relaxed I've felt in years. Emma smiles. What, you mean without someone telling you what to do every minute of the day? That's exactly it. He takes a sip of his coffee and gives her a playful grin. And don't think I didn't notice you let me pay this time. You're getting soft. Only because I was too busy making sure you didn't try to order something ridiculous. She leans in, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. I swear, one more of those royal blends, and I'll walk out of here again. Edward laughs, clearly enjoying the ease between them. What can I say? I'm a sucker for overpriced specialty coffee. They fall into easy conversation, chatting about their favorite books, sharing bits and pieces of their pasts. As the morning passes, the cafe fills with the gentle hum of conversation, but it's as if Emma and Edward exist in their own little bubble. Neither one of them wants to acknowledge that these moments are starting to feel, well, important. A few days later, it's a walk in the park. They meet under the guise of getting fresh air, though Emma knows Edward could probably walk through any park in the world without being recognized. But today, the trees are bare, the air crisp, and the world feels quiet. They walk side by side at a leisurely pace, neither one rushing. "So, what's next for the renegade prince?" Emma teases, giving him a sideways glance. "More coffee? More books? Or are we going to take on something more exciting today?" Edward grins, enjoying her teasing. "I was thinking of showing you my secret hideaway." "Secret hideaway?" she asks, intrigued. "What? Is it some magical royal cave where you hide from the press and your mother?" "Something like that," he replies, a mysterious gleam in his eye. "It's a place I go when I just need peace. No crown, no expectations, just me." As they reach the edge of the park, he leads her down a small, winding path she's never noticed before. It's tucked away, far from the hustle and bustle of the town. The only sound is the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel. When they reach the end of the path, Emma's breath catches in her throat. It's a little stone bench beneath an old oak tree, overlooking a quiet, secluded garden. There are no crowds, no cameras, just the soft whisper of the wind through the leaves. It's beautiful. "This is it," Edward says, sitting down on the bench and patting the spot next to him. "My little piece of normal." Emma sits beside him, a little caught off guard by how much this small space means to him. "It's perfect," she says softly, looking out over the quiet garden. They sit there for a while, not talking much, just enjoying the simplicity of the moment. Every so often, their hands brush, and neither of them pulls away. They don't acknowledge it, but the chemistry between them is undeniable. And then, one day, it's a secret bookstore date. Edward shows up unannounced, as he often does, with a grin plastered on his face. "I know you've been dying to show me your collection of shameless romance novels," he says, his voice dripping with playful sarcasm. "Today's the day." Emma rolls her eyes, but can't hide the smile tugging at her lips. "I'll show you, but only if you promise not to mock my picks." "Deal." As the afternoon stretches on, they wander through the aisles, talking about books, life, and everything in between. Emma is taken aback by how comfortable she feels with him. They don't need to pretend anything here. There's no pressure, no royal title looming between them. It's just two people finding joy in the simplest of things. Edward stops at a shelf and pulls a book down. "Okay, I've decided. This one. I need to know what a true romantic classic is." Emma laughs. "Don't say I didn't warn you. Pride and Prejudice is no joke." They sit down in a cozy nook of the bookstore, with the sound of pages turning between them. There's a sense of ease in the air, the kind that comes from genuine companionship. Emma catches herself smiling at Edward over the top of her book, and for a brief moment, it hits her. These casual outings are starting to feel like something more than just innocent fun. And yet, neither of them acknowledges it. They go on pretending that nothing serious is happening. Just friends. Just two people who like coffee and books. But with every visit, every secret outing, the lines between friendship and something more begin to blur, and neither is sure how long they can keep pretending. But when they almost kiss under a street lamp one evening, it's clear. They're in deep. 2. The Queen's interference. The Queen, sensing trouble, summons Emma to the palace. She politely but firmly warns her that Edward cannot marry a commoner. One afternoon, after a particularly cozy secret bookstore date with Edward, Emma's phone buzzes with a message that stops her cold. The Queen requests your presence at the palace at your earliest convenience. A knot tightens in her stomach. Of course, she knew this was coming. The media, the rumors, the endless press coverage. Things were escalating, and it seemed the Queen wasn't going to wait any longer to step in. Emma doesn't waste time thinking about it. She's no stranger to confrontation, especially when it comes to defending her independence. But the thought of facing Queen Eleanor, the embodiment of royal decorum and tradition, sends a wave of apprehension over her. Still, she couldn't turn down a request from the Queen without risking the wrath of the monarchy. She had no choice but to go. The day of the meeting, Emma dresses as casually as she can while still looking presentable. A simple, elegant dress and a blazer, then heads to the palace, her nerves in check but her mind swirling with 100 different scenarios. The massive gold-trimmed gates of the royal estate seem to swallow her up as she enters. The grandeur of the place as overwhelming as always. She's escorted to a sitting room where Queen Eleanor waits, seated in a plush chair, her gaze sharp and calculating. "Miss Carter," the Queen says, with an air of formality that's a little colder than Emma expected. "Please sit." Emma takes a deep breath and sits down across from the Queen, maintaining her poise. "Your Majesty," she greets with a polite nod. "I've heard quite a bit about you," the Queen begins, her voice calm but unwavering. "You're an intelligent, passionate woman with a certain stubbornness, I'm told." She raises an eyebrow, almost as if it's a compliment. "That's all well and good, but there are matters far more serious than your books and your little shop." Emma feels a flicker of annoyance at the Queen's dismissive tone, but she pushes it down, knowing it would do no good to challenge the monarch outright. "I'm sure there are, Your Majesty." The Queen's lips tighten, and her gaze sharpens. "My son, Edward, has been spending a considerable amount of time with you. I'm not blind to the rumors circulating." She pauses, as though letting the weight of her words sink in. "And I'm afraid I must make something very clear. It's one thing for Edward to entertain your company as an acquaintance, but quite another for this relationship to develop into something more serious." Emma sits up straighter, suddenly feeling the pressure of the room. "I'm not sure what you mean," she says cautiously, though she has a sinking feeling she knows exactly where this is going. The Queen's eyes narrow. "I mean that Edward cannot marry a commoner. It's simply not done. He has responsibilities, duties to this kingdom, to his title. His position is not one to be taken lightly. Marrying someone like you," she gestures toward Emma dismissively, "would be a scandal that this country cannot afford." Emma's heart pounds in her chest. She had anticipated this, but hearing it from the Queen in such a direct, cutting way stings more than she imagined. She clenches her jaw, her independence flaring up inside her. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm not looking to change Edward's life or ruin anything. We're just two people who enjoy each other's company." The Queen's expression remains cold, unyielding. "That's what you believe, Miss Carter. But if you care for my son at all, you'll step aside. Let him fulfill his duties to his people. He was born for greatness. You were born to run a bookstore." She leans forward, her voice lowering, her words like a warning. "I strongly suggest you consider your position carefully. This fantasy of yours, of his, is something that will come to an end sooner rather than later. Emma's hands grip the arms of the chair, her heart hammering in her chest. She's never been one to back down from a challenge, but this feels different. The weight of centuries of tradition hangs heavily in the room, suffocating her defiance. "I didn't ask for any of this, Your Majesty," Emma says, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. And neither did Edward. If he wants to follow his heart, he has the right to do so. The Queen lets out a sharp sigh, her expression now one of pity. "You misunderstand, Miss Carter. It's not about what he wants. It's about what he must do. And if you truly care for him, you will walk away. For his sake, for the sake of the kingdom, and for your own peace of mind." Emma takes a moment, her thoughts racing. She feels the weight of the Queen's words pressing down on her, but she refuses to let them break her. She stands, straightening her posture with renewed determination. "Thank you for your time, Your Majesty," Emma says coolly, her heart heavy with the weight of the conversation, but her voice unwavering. "I'll make my decision on my own. I suggest you let Edward make his." The Queen's eyes flash with a mixture of surprise and irritation, but she says nothing as Emma turns and walks out of the room, her resolve hardening with each step. She knows this isn't over, that the Queen won't stop until she's won. But Emma isn't going to give up without a fight. Not now. Not when her heart, and more importantly, Edward's heart, are at stake. As Emma leaves the palace grounds, her phone buzzes. It's a message from Edward. "Are you okay?" But even as she hits send, she knows that things are about to get much more complicated. Emma, furious, declares, "Good thing I wasn't planning on marrying him then." 3. The first fight. Edward, trying to protect Emma from the harsh royal spotlight, starts pulling away. Emma, thinking he's caving to his family's expectations, pushes him away first. Edward spends the following days avoiding Emma, trying to keep her out of the media's relentless gaze. He knows the Queen's warning is just the beginning of the pressure that will come down on them both. With each new headline, each new camera flash, he feels the walls closing in, the weight of his royal duty suffocating the space he once had with Emma. He tries to keep his distance to protect her, but every text, every message from her only stirs the guilt and longing he's been trying to suppress. He knows Emma deserves more than this life of secrecy and scandal, but his heart refuses to let go. Emma, on the other hand, is crushed. The silence from Edward cuts deeper than any royal reprimand. She knows he's busy with his responsibilities, but the distance feels like a betrayal. She can't help but think that he's letting his family's expectations control his actions, that he's starting to fall in line with the life he was always meant to lead. The life he was born into, not the one he chose. One evening, after days of unanswered calls and messages, Emma stands at the counter of her bookstore, the bell above the door ringing softly as it opens. She turns, expecting to see a customer, but it's Edward standing there. Her heart lurches, but she hides it behind a mask of indifference. "What are you doing here?" she asks, her voice cool, betraying none of the emotion she's been feeling. Edward looks pained, his eyes searching hers. "Emma, I'm sorry, He stops himself, clearly struggling with the right words. "I've been trying to keep you out of this mess, to protect you from everything that's happening. But I hate the silence between us. I hate how things are right now." Emma's chest tightens. She wants to throw herself into his arms, to feel the comfort of him, but she can't. Not when she's not sure he's the man she thought he was. "Edward," she starts, her voice wavering despite her best efforts. "I'm not the one who needed protecting. You're the one who's pushing me away." He looks startled by her words, but he doesn't back down. "I'm not pushing you away. I'm trying to keep you safe. The press, my family, the kingdom, they're all watching. I don't want you to be dragged into all of this, Emma." She scoffs bitterly. "Dragged into what, Edward? You mean your duty to your family and the throne? Is that it? Because it sure feels like you're choosing that life over us." Edward flinches, the sting of her words cutting deeper than he expected. "It's not that simple. I don't want to lose you, but I'm being pulled in so many directions, and I don't know how to balance all of it. I can't ask you to be a part of this world." Emma takes a step back, her eyes narrowing as she processes his words. She wants to believe him, but the doubt gnaws at her. "No, you can't ask me to be a part of it, because you're not even asking yourself. You're just letting them tell you what to do." "I'm not," he begins, but Emma cuts him off. "I don't want to be the reason you give up everything, Edward. If your family's expectations matter more to you than I do, then maybe this isn't something that's going to work." The words hang in the air between them, like a weight neither of them can lift. Edward opens his mouth to respond, but the words fail him. He can see the hurt in her eyes, the walls she's building around herself to protect her heart. And he's the one who put them there. "Maybe it's better if we take a step back," Emma says softly, almost like a whisper, as if the idea of it hurts her. "Maybe we need to figure out what this is without all the pressure." The finality in her voice slices through him. He doesn't want this. He doesn't want to lose her. But he knows deep down that his life is a whirlwind of obligations, and no matter how badly he wants to carve out a space for Emma in it, he feels like he's dragging her into a storm she doesn't deserve. Emma walks to the back of the shop, her mind a whirlwind of emotions, and when she glances over her shoulder, she sees Edward standing frozen in place, looking lost, but still determined to protect her in the only way he knows how, by letting her go. Without another word, he turns to leave. The door chimes ringing as he exits. Emma stands still, feeling the space between them stretch further than ever, and for a moment, she wonders if she made a mistake. But she won't let herself fall into a pattern of waiting, of hoping he'll change his mind. If this is how it has to be, then she'll accept it, even though it breaks her. She watches the door swing closed behind him, her heart heavy, but her resolve growing stronger. Cue sad bookstore montages as Emma pretends she's totally fine. She is not. Act 4. The public frenzy and the big misunderstanding. 1. The tabloid scandal. A fake news story breaks claiming that Edward is secretly engaged to a noblewoman. Emma, heartbroken, believes it. Edward, who has no idea the story exists, is confused when Emma suddenly refuses to speak to him. A few days after the painful conversation between Emma and Edward, the quiet tension in Emma's life is shattered by a headline that hits her like a punch to the stomach. Prince Edward secretly engaged to Lady Isabella Kensington. Royal wedding on the horizon. The article is everywhere, on every tabloid and royal gossip site. The headline screams in bold letters, accompanied by grainy photos of Edward and a woman she doesn't recognize, supposedly attending an event together. The tone of the article is scandalous, as if the royal family had been hiding their secret engagement all along. The rumors feel so real, so final, and Emma can't help but believe them. Her stomach churns as she reads the article again, and then again. She scrolls down through the comments, seeing how quickly the public has latched onto the idea that Edward is moving on, making plans for his future without her. Her hands tremble as she puts her phone down, tears welling up in her eyes. She's fought so hard to keep her heart open to him, but this betrayal is too much to ignore. For days, she shuts herself in her bookstore, avoiding phone calls and text messages, her mind replaying every moment she and Edward had shared. She remembers the first time they laughed together, the quiet walks, the shared secrets. But now, it all feels like a lie. Maybe she was just another distraction to him, a fling to keep him busy for a while. Edward is a prince. He has responsibilities, expectations, a future mapped out for him, and he clearly intends to follow it. The news confirms everything Emma had been fearing deep down. The connection they shared was never meant to last. And now, he's moving on with someone who fits into his world. Someone like Lady Isabella Kensington. Meanwhile, Edward is completely unaware of the storm raging in Emma's heart. He's been caught up in the whirlwind of royal duties, trying to navigate the difficult waters of his family's expectations. He hasn't seen Emma in a few days. He's been giving her space, as they both agreed, but he's eager to talk to her, to clear up the air, to make things right. He's finally ready to do what he should have done all along: fight for them. When he arrives at Emma's bookstore that afternoon, his heart skips at the sight of her shop's warm glow through the window. He opens the door with the familiar chime of the bell, but as soon as he steps inside, something feels off. "Emma," he calls softly, his voice unsure as he approaches the counter. But there's no response. He steps further into the shop, scanning the aisles, but she's nowhere to be seen. Confused, he walks toward the back of the store, where he knows she usually works. When he sees her, he's taken aback. She's standing there, facing away from him, her back stiff and her posture closed off. She doesn't turn to acknowledge him, doesn't even flinch at the sound of his footsteps. "Emma," he says again, this time a little louder. "What's going on? We need to talk." At the sound of his voice, she turns slightly but doesn't fully face him. Her expression is unreadable, her eyes distant. "I think we've talked enough." Edward's confusion deepens. "What do you mean? You've been avoiding me. What's happening?" She takes a long breath, clearly struggling with the words she's about to say. "I saw the news," she says, her voice steady but cold. "About you and Lady Isabella." The engagement. Edward's heart stops. "What?" He shakes his head, incredulous. "Emma, no, that's not true. There's no engagement. I don't even know where they got that idea from." But Emma cuts him off, her voice sharp. "Don't," she says, holding up a hand, her face hardening. "I've seen the photos. I've seen the way you're smiling at her. You don't have to explain anything to me. I get it. You're a prince, Edward. You have responsibilities, a future planned out. You don't need to explain to me why you're moving on." Edward feels the ground shift beneath him. "Emma, wait. Listen to me. Those photos, they mean nothing. There's no engagement. I've been busy, caught up with royal duties. This has nothing to do with what's between us. I care about you. I've always cared about you." Emma steps back, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. How am I supposed to believe that? The rumors, the press, they're everywhere. You've been avoiding me, and now this engagement story. I can't keep pretending like everything's okay when the truth is staring me in the face. Edward steps closer, his heart racing. I didn't want to put you through this. I didn't want the press getting involved. But I swear to you, Emma, I haven't made any commitments to anyone else. No engagement, no promises to anyone but you. He pauses, searching her eyes, willing her to understand. Please, don't believe the lies. I need you to trust me. Emma's breath catches, and for a moment, she wants to reach out to him. She wants to believe him, wants to throw herself into his arms and forget the world. But the pain, the betrayal, runs too deep. I don't know if I can anymore, Edward. She whispers, her voice cracking. Edward's chest tightens, the weight of his own helplessness crashing over him. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't know how to make this right, but I'm here, Emma. I'm always here if you'll let me. She closes her eyes for a moment, taking in a shaky breath. When she opens them again, there's no mistaking the sadness in her gaze. I need space, Edward. I need time to think. The words hit him like a slap. He wants to argue, to fight for her, but he knows this isn't about him anymore. It's about what's best for her. If she needs time, then he has no choice but to give it to her. I'll give you the space, he says quietly, his voice low. But know that I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be here for you. With that, he turns and leaves the bookstore, his heart heavier than it's ever been. Emma watches him go, feeling the distance between them grow once again. The pain of the misunderstanding is too much to bear, but she can't shake the feeling that something, everything, has changed. 2. The dramatic confrontation. Edward crashes one of Emma's book readings, demanding to know why she's avoiding him. Emma angrily throws a romance novel at him, which he barely dodges, and yells, "Why don't you go marry your fancy royal fiancé?" Edward, utterly baffled, asks, "What fiancé?" They both realize the truth. The media lied. 3. The first real confession. Edward, frustrated, finally says it out loud. "I don't want a royal match. I want you." Emma, still hesitant, replies, "Even if I don't fit in?" Edward grins. "Then we'll make a new fit. A CT5, the Royal Declaration. 1. Edward's bold move. At a major royal event, instead of delivering his pre-approved speech about duty, Edward declares in front of thousands. At the grand gala celebrating the royal family's annual charity event, the atmosphere is electric. The venue is a lavish ballroom filled with influential guests from around the world, adorned with glittering chandeliers and sparkling decorations. The royal family is front and center, standing tall and proud as Edward, as the heir to the throne, prepares to deliver his highly anticipated speech. His mother, Queen Eleanor, watches with a critical eye, having meticulously vetted every word of his address beforehand. Edward takes the podium, the eyes of the crowd trained on him, their whispers silenced in anticipation. The familiar speech he's about to give is one he's delivered countless times before, about the importance of duty, tradition, and service to the kingdom. But as he clears his throat, something inside him shifts. The weight of the crown, the expectations of his family, and the endless pressure to conform to a life planned out for him come crashing down in that very moment. His mind races, but then a vision of Emma's face appears in his thoughts. Her sharp wit, her laughter, her defiant spirit. For the first time in years, Edward makes a decision entirely his own. He opens his mouth, but instead of the expected words of duty, he speaks from his heart. I stand before you today, not as a prince fulfilling my duties, but as a man, he begins, his voice steady, but filled with raw sincerity. A man who has learned that there's more to life than just meeting expectations, more to love than simply playing the role others assign to you. The crowd is silent, unsure of what to make of this unorthodox speech. Queen Eleanor's expression darkens, her lips pressed into a tight line as she watches her son veer from the script. I've spent my life in the shadow of duty, thinking that it would lead to fulfillment, thinking that it was the only path I could walk. Edward continues. But I've learned something important in recent months. True happiness doesn't come from doing what's expected of you. It comes from being true to yourself and to the people you love. The murmurs in the room grow louder, but Edward presses on, his eyes scanning the crowd, his thoughts focused on one person in particular. There is someone who has shown me that love isn't a fairy tale. It's real, messy, imperfect, and powerful. She's taught me that no matter how much you try to control life, it always has a way of surprising you. He pauses, taking a deep breath, then looks directly into the crowd, his gaze filled with purpose. That someone is Emma Carter. She's not a noblewoman. She's not a princess. She's a woman who owns a bookstore, who speaks her mind, and who doesn't give a damn about royal titles. And I love her. The silence in the room is deafening. The guests exchange shocked glances, and Queen Eleanor's face contorts in disbelief. Edward, however, doesn't flinch. His heart beats faster, but this is the moment he's been waiting for. No more hiding, no more pretending. I love her, he repeats, his voice stronger now, and I will not apologize for it. She is the one I choose, not because of her status or lack thereof, but because she is real, and because she makes me feel like the man I want to be. There's a beat of stunned silence, followed by a flurry of whispers. Some are skeptical, others intrigued, but all eyes are on Edward, waiting for him to say more, to justify his words. But he doesn't. He simply stands there, his chest rising and falling with each breath, waiting for the storm that's sure to come. I don't know what the future holds, he continues, his voice softer now, but I know that I want Emma in it. And if that means defying tradition, if that means stepping away from everything I've been taught to value, then I will do it. Because my happiness, and hers, matters more than any crown. With that, Edward steps away from the podium, his heart pounding, his declaration hanging in the air. He doesn't wait for applause or approval. His eyes search the room for one person, Emma. And though she's not physically there, in that moment, Edward knows he's done the right thing. He's made his choice. No matter what happens next, he's ready to fight for his future, for the woman he loves, and for the life they can create together. The crowd is left in stunned silence, the weight of his words settling over them. The royal family is in chaos, but Edward's heart has never been lighter. I choose my own happiness. I choose Emma. The Queen nearly drops her champagne. The entire country gasps. To Emma's reaction. Watching from her bookstore, Emma is shocked, but also in love. Her best friend shoves her toward the palace. Girl, go get your prince. 3. The press conference chaos. Emma storms into a live royal press event. Edward, you came. Emma, you ruined my peaceful prince-free life, you dramatic idiot. Edward, you love me. Emma, Maybe. The press loses it. Act 6. The Queen's last test. 1. A royal weekend. The Queen, reluctantly impressed by Emma's spirit, gives her 1 weekend at the palace to see if she can handle royal life. Emma predictably struggles. She trips over her dress at a royal banquet. She insults a duke by accident. She starts a food fight with Edward's mischievous younger sister. But instead of being embarrassed, Edward loves every second of it. 2. The Queen's surprising decision. By the end of the weekend, Queen Eleanor sighs and mutters, "At least she's entertaining." She approves of the match begrudgingly. Act 7. The Proposal and the Happily Ever After. 1. The Grand Proposal. Edward takes Emma to the palace gardens. Fireworks light up the night sky. Edward takes Emma's hand gently, leading her through the grand corridors of the palace. The buzz of the gala has faded behind them, but the excitement in the air is far from over. Emma's heart still races from the bold speech Edward delivered in front of thousands, and the words echo in her mind. I love her. It's impossible to ignore the gravity of the moment, but Edward's quiet presence beside her is a calming balm to her swirling thoughts. They exit through a side door, away from the clamor and bright lights of the royal event. The night is cool, but the air is crisp and refreshing as they make their way into the palace gardens. The full moon casts a soft glow over the manicured lawns, and the scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass fills the air. It feels like a world away from the chaos inside the palace walls. As they walk further into the gardens, Edward's hand still holding hers, they reach a small terrace overlooking a beautiful fountain. The sound of water flowing in the background is soothing, and for a moment, everything feels peaceful, almost as if the world has paused, just for them. You didn't have to do that, Emma says, her voice soft but full of emotion. You didn't have to stand up in front of everyone like that. It was a lot. Edward smiles, though it's laced with a tenderness she hasn't seen before. He turns toward her, his eyes intense and sincere. I did it because it was the right thing to do, he says. Because it's true. I love you, Emma, and I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Emma's breath catches in her throat. She wants to say something, anything, but the words are stuck, tangled in the web of emotions that have built up inside her. Instead, she looks up at him, her gaze softening, the walls she'd built around her heart starting to crumble. Before she can respond, the distant sound of fireworks crackles in the air. A bright flash of color bursts overhead, lighting up the dark sky with shimmering reds, blues, and golds. The sound of their explosions rumbles in the distance, but the sight is breathtaking. Emma's eyes widen at the sudden display of light. Fireworks? I didn't think they'd start this soon. Edward chuckles softly. The fireworks are for you, actually. She turns to look at him in surprise. For me? He nods. It's tradition. The first time a royal publicly announces their love for someone, the fireworks light up the sky. Emma can't help but laugh, a genuine, disbelieving laugh. That's ridiculous. But it's true, Edward says with a grin, pulling her a little closer as they both watch the colorful fireworks explode above them. Each burst of light fills the air with a sense of magic, and the night seems to hold its breath, as though it, too, is awestruck by the power of the moment. She lets out a deep breath and leans into him, her head resting on his shoulder. I still can't believe this is happening, she admits quietly. Watching the fireworks explode in brilliant colors. A couple of weeks ago, I thought my biggest worry was getting through another day at the bookstore. And now, this. Edward's arm wraps around her, pulling her closer as they both stand in the warm glow of the fireworks. I think we've both had our fair share of surprises, he says, with a wry smile. But you've shown me a side of life I never knew I needed. A life that's real, and that's worth more than anything royal. Emma turns to look up at him, her eyes glistening in the firework light. I'm still scared, she admits softly, the vulnerability in her voice stark and honest. Scared that it won't work, that I'll be just another chapter in your fairy tale. Edward gently cups her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek as he gazes into her eyes with a deep, unwavering certainty. I'm not living a fairy tale, Emma, he says softly, and neither are you. We're writing our own story, and no matter what happens, I want you by my side. Her heart swells at his words, and for the first time, the uncertainty she's felt in her chest begins to fade. With him, there's no pretense, no grand title to uphold, just a man who loves her for who she is. The fireworks reach their grand finale, painting the night sky with a stunning array of colors. For a moment, everything seems to slow down. There's no royal family, no public eye, just the two of them, standing in the garden, watching the sky burn with brilliance. Edward takes her hand once again, pulling her gently into a dance. They move together, slow and steady, as the fireworks continue to light up the sky. Emma rests her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. I think I'm ready for this, she whispers. Edward smiles, kissing the top of her head. Then let's make sure we write the best story we can. As the fireworks fade, the quiet of the garden envelops them, and in that moment, surrounded by nothing but each other, Emma and Edward know they're on the path to something real, something that no fairy tale could ever compare to. The night may be full of surprises, but together they'll face whatever comes next, hand in hand. And as the last firework fades into the night, they share a kiss, one that marks the beginning of their happily ever after. Kneeling before her, he smirks and says, Emma Carter, will you do me the honor of making the royal family lose their minds and marry me? Emma, laughing through tears, replies, only if you promise to stop sneaking into my bookstore disguised as a tourist. He grins. No promises. She says yes, to the happy ending. Their wedding is a perfect mix of royal tradition and Emma's chaotic personality. She insists on walking herself down the aisle. Their first dance turns into a spontaneous swing dance battle. The Queen actually smiles. As they sneak away from the reception, Edward whispers, still think princes are overrated. Emma grins, maybe just this one. They kiss. Fireworks explode. Happily ever after.
The Stories book is a captivating collection of tales that traverse diverse genres and emotions, spanning the realms of fantasy, science fiction, romance, and mystery. Each narrative is a journey into the unexpected, weaving intricate plots and compelling characters. With a skillful blend of vivid imagery and thought-provoking themes, this anthology invites readers to explore the depths of imagination and discover the universal threads that connect us all. From heartwarming moments to spine, we hope you enjoyed these captivating video stories. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content like this. Thanks for watching, and keep spreading the video story.